Hello everyone, let's review the results of the 3-card blind main event tournament for April. This month we had 264 players, 69 of which were brand new players to the main event. This was a really incredible turnout and an especially high number of new players relative to recent months. So regardless of whether you're a new player or a format veteran, thank you for participating in the tournament and I hope to see you again next month. Out of the 264 submissions we saw this month, there were 181 unique decks. If we weigh cards in these decks by their performance and run them through the Simpsons Diversity Index, we will see that this month was a decrease in diversity from the month prior. However, as a bit of context here, last month was the most diverse meta we've ever seen in the history of this tournament. If we were to compare the diversity in this month to 2 months prior instead, you would see that this month was actually a small increase from the meta that we saw in February. The 3-card blind diversity grade for this month was a B. The biggest shakeup to the meta this month by far was the fact that Tarkir Dragonstorm brought some incredibly powerful new cards into the format. In fact, the most popular non-mana source cards this month were Sage of the Skies and Sinkhole Surveyor, which were ranked 5th and 6th in terms of popularity overall. The most popular card this month was Ancient Tomb, which at this point you've probably gotten pretty used to hearing that. Ancient Tomb is a component of many decks in the format, so its popularity is mostly just confirmation that having access to 2 or more mana on the first turn of the game is a very powerful effect. From here, I think it makes sense to jump straight into discussing our winners to help you gain a deeper understanding of the meta. In Novice 3, we had a tie between Draco Del Mal and Griff Min, who were both playing Peat Bog, Sinkhole Surveyor, and Smallpox. Smallpox has been a strong 3-card blind staple for a long time now. And because Sinkhole Surveyor can create tokens, it is a very powerful scaling threat that can break parity on Smallpox because you only lose your small token instead of your powerful threat. This was not the only winning deck we saw for Sinkhole Surveyor. In Novice 2, our winner was Sultai Lennon, who was playing Peat Bog, Sinkhole Surveyor, and Sinkhole Surveyor. Sinkhole Surveyor is just a generically very powerful threat, so running 2 of them is doubling up on a good thing. In Novice 1, our winner was Hyalophage, who was playing Ancient Tomb, Mox Pearl, and Sage of the Skies. This was our other big Tarkir Dragonstorm card that we saw this month, and unlike Sinkhole Surveyor, it really only has one version of the deck list, and it has a very linear play pattern. The deck simply dumps its hand on turn 1, and 2 2/3s with Flying and Lifelink is strong enough to outrace a huge number of viable 3-card blind decks right now. In Aspirant 3, our winner was Uncommon Grey, who was playing Mox Jet, Rishadan Port, and Sinkhole Surveyor. As it turns out, Sinkhole Surveyor isn't just good with Peat Bog. Because it has only a single black pip, it can be played with Mox Jet and a utility land. And in the case of Rishadan Port, this allows the deck to lock players using depletion lands and storage lands out of the game entirely. In Aspirant 2, our winner was Omnichair, who was playing Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, Lotus Bloom, and Show and Tell. For reference here, we banned Barren Glory at the end of February. Barren Glory plus 2 Lotus Blooms was a different flavor of this deck that simply edged out the Emrakul Show and Tell version in terms of performance and popularity. That being said, I think it will become plainly evident that the downgrade from Barren Glory to Emrakul is a very small one, if any at all. Barren Glory wins the game 1 turn after it's landed, and Emrakul basically wins the game 1 turn after it's landed. The one critical vulnerability that Emrakul has that Barren Glory doesn't might be that it's vulnerable to cards like Karakas or the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale, but ultimately both decks are trying to do the same thing with a slight modification in how they end the game. In Aspirant 1, our winner was MathCrafter00, who was playing Ancient Tomb, Isochron Scepter, and Lightning Helix. This is a classic 3-card blind deck, and it was positioned very well this month because Lightning Helix can kill Sage of the Skies and its cloned copy with no trouble at all. There were 3 players playing the Sage of the Skies decks in this pod, so MathCrafter00 was able to make out with a very admirable 84% average score. In Contender 5, UniG was also playing Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, Lotus Bloom, and Show and Tell. As an additional note to what I've said before about Show and Tell, UniG mentioned to me that a big driver for why they chose this deck was that Leyline of Singularity got banned, and therefore one of Emrakul's greatest vulnerabilities, Karakas, was likely to be much less popular this month compared to months prior. In Contender 4, our winner was, and let me know if I pronounce this correctly, Mauschloss, who was playing Ancient Tomb, Mox Pearl, and Sage of the Skies. Because of how much we've talked about this deck already, there isn't really anything more we can share, but it's another data point confirming that the deck was very powerful. In Contender 3, our winner was Him to Twiddle, who was playing Assassin's Trophy, Golgari Rot Farm, and Treetop Village. This is not this deck's first rodeo. At the end of last month, as a community, we voted on Assassin's Trophy to determine whether we wanted to add it to the ban list, specifically because this deck has been a consistently strong performer. This month it was the third most popular deck overall, and it is evidently still capable of putting up a very strong performance. In Contender 2, our winner was Super Nerd 969, who was playing Ancient Tomb, Drillworks Mole, and Sphere of Resistance. We've seen Sphere of Resistance a few times over the past couple of months, but this time we're seeing it being played with Ancient Tomb rather than a Mox plus Mutavault. Because Drillworks Mole only costs 1 mana, it can be played through Sphere of Resistance's tax effect. And although it costs a lot of life to power up Drillworks Mole, the fact that you have the option to do so makes this deck a little more resilient in matches where it doesn't take the first turn of the game and therefore can't capitalize on Sphere of Resistance to as much of a degree. In Contender 1, our winner was Swift Warkite 2, who was playing Ancient Tomb, Apocrycite, and the Filigree Silex. This is an interesting combination that leverages the Filigree Silex as an extremely versatile piece of removal, and Apocrycite as a sticky threat that is hard to get rid of. I think it's worth mentioning here that unlike a number of other threats that you might play with the Filigree Silex, Apocrycite doesn't mind at all if it gets hit by collateral damage. If you need to destroy your opponent's 2-drop with the Filigree Silex, Apocrycite doesn't mind at all if it's destroyed, and it will even come back as a more potent threat. And finally, our winner in Exemplar was Vermilion, who was playing Inquisition of Kozilek, Subterranean Hangar, and Tomb of Arami. As is the pattern with many decks that run turn 1 hand attack, this deck can win most of the games where it takes the first turn. Tomb of Arami enters untapped, which allows you to play a turn 1 hand attack spell, while also including a powerful storage land payoff to finish up the game with. Because your entire threat package comes in the form of lands, this deck itself is resistant to many decks that try to lock you out of the game on turn 1. For example, in this pod, Vermilion is able to pull off a net positive win rate against Sphere of Resistance, Elite Spellbinder, and Mesmeric Fiend. And this has led to Vermilion retaining the champion title for the 2nd month in a row, and for holding the title for the 5th time overall, with an impressive 1888 ELO rating. And with that, I'd like to congratulate our winners one more time, and move on to discussing the cards that will be included in this month's community ban vote. We'll start off with the most significant inclusion on this list, which is Ancient Tomb. Ancient Tomb was the most popular card this month, and has been the most popular card in many months. This month, 5 of the 12 pod winners were using Ancient Tomb as their mana source. Ancient Tomb's ability to generate twice as much mana as a typical land on the first turn of the game means it naturally promotes highly explosive strategies to be a core part of the meta. Whether that's a good thing or not is entirely up to debate. We can certainly look at individual cards that perform very well with Ancient Tomb, but given how popular Ancient Tomb has been for as long as it has been, giving the community the opportunity to express their opinion on Ancient Tomb itself feels appropriate. I think it's also worth mentioning that the majority of Ancient Tomb decks will continue to be viable because they can rely on Crystal Vein or Mana Crypt to produce mana instead. Next up, we have Sage of the Skies, which was the most popular threat this month and was also the main component of the most popular deck, which which was Ancient Tomb, Mox Pearl, and Sage of the Skies. The fact that it deploys on turn 1 and is an evasive threat that makes a net difference between the life total of yourself and your opponent change in increments of 8 per combat makes it incredibly challenging to race. It being split into 2 separate bodies also offers the benefit of being able to attack and defend simultaneously, and gives it a natural resistance to single target removal. It is possible that the meta could adjust to better counter this deck, but given how popular it was and the fact that it won multiple pods, it definitely belonged on this vote. Our other new card from Tarkir Dragonstorm, Sinkhole Surveyor, is the next card on this list. Sinkhole Surveyor was the second most popular threat behind Sage of the Skies, and it won multiple pods while being included in decks that had relatively distinct strategies. The fact that it performed well as a threat to complement Smallpox in a more controlling style deck, Mox plus Rishadenport in a deck that attempts to shut down players relying on storage and depletion lands, and even in a deck where it was run side by side with an additional copy of itself, is a clear indicator that the card is generically very powerful no matter how you would like to use it. Unlike Sage of the Skies, I think the meta would have a much harder time adapting to this card because the nature of the decks that it does well in are all quite different from each other. If it remains legal, I suspect that this will be a highly dominant card in upcoming months. Next up, we have Show and Tell, which was being used in tandem with Lotus Bloom to pump out enormous bombs like Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. It seems that banning Barren Glory did put a dent into how popular Lotus Bloom decks were, but in terms of what these decks are trying to do, Show and Tell combined with Emrakul accomplishes something extremely similar to what Barren Glory did. If Show and Tell were added to the ban list, players could still use 2 copies of Lotus Bloom to accomplish something relatively similar. For example, Garruk Cursed Huntsman is an incredibly powerful bomb that can be pumped out using 2 Lotus Blooms, and although it doesn't shut down players and win the game quite as quickly as Emrakul does, Garruk and other potential double Lotus Bloom threats will typically win the game in any match where they resolve. For that reason, I do want to make it clear that if we were to ban Show and Tell, that likely represents an incremental and mostly cosmetic change to the meta, but if you're getting a little tired of seeing Show and Tell and Emrakul, this would represent an opportunity to see a change of pace. And the final card on our list is one that we haven't talked about yet this month, which is Lodestone Golem. For context here, for those of you who are not part of the Discord community, we discuss which cards to include in the monthly ban vote to try to take into account as many perspectives of members of the community as possible. So if you haven't already and you are interested in participating in these discussions, I'd recommend joining the Discord, which you can do by using the link in the description of this video. Although Lodestone Golem had an anemic performance this month, it was the 4th most popular deck in combination with Ancient Tomb and Mana Vault. Its high power and ability to slow down the opponent or lock them out of the game entirely makes it a bit of a frustrating card to have as part of the meta. It is also one of the many cards that leverages Ancient Tomb that probably won't be impacted that substantially by an Ancient Tomb ban because it can easily switch to Crystal Vein or Mana Crypt without its primary game plan being compromised that much. That having been said, it really didn't perform very well this month, but based on feedback from community members like you, it felt like an important card to include on this list because of how it impacts the player brewing experience, and it is one of the Ancient Tomb decks that would be impacted the least by an Ancient Tomb ban. And that wraps up the list of cards that will be included on this month's community ban vote. As a reminder, you can participate in the community ban vote by visiting the website linked in the description of this video. I'm eager to hear your thoughts about this month's meta, as well as the cards that were included on this month's ban vote. Thanks for watching, everyone, and see you soon.